Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the Wealth Amplifier podcast. I'm Matt Liebman. Aaron Marks, Patrick Swift, welcome to the pod.
Good to be here for one of the final episodes of the year.
That is true. We are sitting here in early November, so only a few left.
Getting close to 50. I was when you said episode 42, wow, here we are, getting close.
And I wonder if we have any listeners that have listened to every episode. If so, shoot us an email or let us know.
Yeah, we'll send you a prize.
That's right. We'll go into the swag closet, see what we got for you.
Yeah, or a deposit slip, either one.
All right, so why don't we get started? I know there's been a lot of stuff in the headlines. We also want to talk about this conference we were at recently where we had some pretty top-notch investment speakers there. But before we do that, let's do some year-end planning. Pat, you want to drive the bus there?
Yeah, sure. We were talking about year-end planning. We talk about year-end planning every year, obviously, such as the name. And there are some items that I think are evergreen. We've probably discussed at length on this podcast, so we don't want to bore anyone, but some of them might be worth repeating. I think what's a little more interesting is the fact that we had a big tax bill passed this year. And I think my interpretation of it, especially for many of the folks that we work with at Amplius, is I think you have some reasonably good opportunity to do some cool tax stuff this year. And I think some of that really just comes on the back of some psychological change, frankly, where if this law hadn't been changed, you would have been operating under a different pretense. And now there are some favorable changes to the tax law. So all else equal, if you do a few things, you might have a lower tax bill this year, which everybody usually generally likes to hear. So let me stop there. You guys want to weigh in on anything specific there? We can obviously touch on a few specific parts of that bill.
Yeah, no, every year is sort of, you've got the same set of rules, but this year you've got some extra ones. Some years the market's down a ton and it means one thing, and others it's up a ton and it means another. So all in all, you can't just blindly go into year end with the same game plan as always.
Just before we get into the substance, just compliments. Pat, how great does Aaron's voice sound? I don't know if it's a new mic or something. You sound fantastic today.
Yeah, it sounds.
Voice lessons, they're paying off, I guess.
Right, exactly. Let's let you sing soon.
My daughter had choir practice this morning. Maybe next time I'll go with her.
Right. Maybe you were inspired. I think what you guys said there was right. As far as the one big beautiful bill, and I'm curious, Pat, for some of your bigger takeaways there and how it impacts this year-end planning. We live in such a wildly active news cycle these days that I almost in some ways forget the bill. I mean, obviously in our day job, we have to refer to it and stuff, but there have been like 15 news stories of significance since then. So why don't you dive in and tell the listeners a couple of your big takeaways from it?
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. It's related to a lot. There was a lot in that bill. And obviously it's also affecting another topic we may touch on, which is this shutdown that we're experiencing. But sticking to just a few high-level takeaways that are specific to this year, so year-end planning type items. The biggest one, or the couple of the biggest ones that I've looked at, is the state and local property tax deduction has increased, the SALT cap. It was $10K since 2017. It's now been raised to $40. Now, the caveat there is once your AGI crosses above 500, you start to lose that benefit, but you won't lose it below 10. So if your income is so high, you'll still have a 10K deduction.
So worst case, you're in the same boat you're in now, and you're only in that boat if you're a super high earner. So it's a reasonably positive development for the taxpayer,
generally speaking, and for those that are in higher income tax states or higher property tax states, that kind of thing.
But just on that, imagine if you were about to go over that $500,000 threshold or whatever, and you don't realize it, and you do, and you just miss out on it. That's some serious planning right there. And you could do back of the envelope, but what if you're wrong? So take some powerful, get a good CPA, get some tax planning software. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, I think that you just hit on exactly what I was thinking, Aaron, is like a couple of these items, you really do want to get kind of laser focused into what your tax numbers are going to be before the year ends. So if you're going to advance any or make any charitable contributions, or you're going to take capital gains, or you're going to do a Roth conversion, all these factors, there's a few newer ones this year that you might want to be aware of because it could be a pretty meaningful tax change. The other one, directly related to this, same thing, has to do with caps, is for those that are 65 or older, there was always, at least through the last tax legislation, a deduction for seniors on top of the standard deduction. So the standard deduction everyone's taken unless you do charitable deductions and have a larger itemized conglomeration of deductions. But seniors, in addition to the standard deduction, got either a $1,600 or a $2,000 additional deduction. That is still in place. Plus, the standard deduction is raised to just shy of 16 grand per individual. Plus, if you're 65, there's a temporary deduction of $6,000 per individual for those between the tax years of 25 to 28. So that all gets caveated with 150K AGI limit if you're married, filing jointly, half of that if you're single. But point being, if you're 65 now, your deduction is like much higher if you're not itemizing than it would have been before this law was passed. So you got a few different things going for you. You're in a high tax state, which we got a lot of clients. You're 65 or older, which we got a lot of clients. You got a bunch of deductions here that are going to lower your tax bill. And so does that give you opportunity to maybe look at some items that you weren't considering, whether it's pushing forward or pulling forward capital gains, doing things like Roth conversions, which we talked about ad nauseum. There's some interesting things to just sort of dial into your point, Aaron. You're 100% right.
So what are some other year-end moves that you guys have been talking about?
Well, one that's pretty simple and not really, I wouldn't call it very sophisticated, but is, so thankfully, and we'll see, look, markets are getting a little cranky here the last couple of days, but knocking on wood, it looks unlikely that there's going to be a whole lot of tax loss harvesting, to do before year end. Most portfolios are, have a lot more gains than they do losses. And my guess is it will stay that way. Who knows? But one thing that I've always found with that we're going to make a proactive effort to do, we have, but we're going to reemphasize it, is just getting a sense of what your actual realized gain and loss is going to be, even if there's nothing to do before year end. I just find that sometimes when people would just hear from their accountant, hey, you had a big gain last year and you have X amount in taxes, the surprise of that sometimes can be jarring for better or worse. So I do think just getting a clearer sense of what this year has looked like for you tax-wise is just good practice to set expectations.
Also, what's coming. Now, this doesn't apply so much to us. It does, but mutual funds are not as prevalent as they once were, especially at our firm. We use a lot of ETFs, the lower cost, more tax efficient, all those good things and reasons that we've talked about before. And I know we are going to do some headlines here, guys, in a little bit, but I'm gonna pull one forward right now. I don't know if you guys were going to bring up the same one, but from CNBC today, double-digit mutual fund payouts are coming. How to avoid the tax hit. So, meaning if you own mutual funds that you bought this year, last year, somewhat recently, you bought it today, you might have a double-digit pass-through of a capital gains distribution, even though you didn't see the benefit of the run-up of that mutual fund. So be aware there are tools that we can use to say, hey, what's anticipated? And then you can make a decision. Hey, do I sell it beforehand because I don't have a big gain? But yeah, you got to be not what has happened this year already and where are my gains and all that sort of stuff, but what's still coming that I might not expect.
Yeah, good. That's a good one, Aaron, because I think just to give us a bit of a pump as well, like those are things I don't generally find, as much as we love our CPA friends, but I generally don't find they're proactively bringing up that one nuanced line item. But with some of the tax planning that we do for clients internally now, that's an item that I look at. So if I'm looking at somebody's tax return and I saw in maybe they just became a client this year, reviewing their tax return from last year, and I see there was capital gain distributions from a mutual fund, I'm usually bringing that up. And I'm like, first of all, are these mutual funds a fit for your investment profile and your investment plan at this point? And number two, are you aware that you had 30, 40, 50, $100,000 in long-term capital gains payout via this fund? And are you comfortable with that? Like, let's fix this and remedy it. Because it's a pretty basic one that I think gets overlooked.
I heard another advisor mention a bunch of years back, and maybe whether you believe it or not, or you agree with the full statement or not, owning mutual funds can be death by 1,000 cuts. It's every year. There's capital gains, over and over and over and over. Whereas you could own other things that do not have that, in quote, feature that mutual funds do. So at some point, maybe you blow it out of, okay, you're going to get a capital gains distribution out of the mutual fund that you own of 8%. But if you're just to sell it outright, it's going to be, a 50% gain. Well, you can just keep getting 8%, 8%, 8%, or wipe it out, put it in something at less or more tax aware, and you have a cleaner picture going forward.
And I think the key point on that is, and you're right, we forget about it sometimes because we're pretty light on mutual funds, in our practice at this point. But a lot of people that are listening, friends and family of our clients, they may not be. And we see when we get a lot of new clients, we see a lot of statements still that have a lot of old mutual funds that are tax inefficient. But I think you hit the nail on the head of the point of, you could get a gain distributed to you that you didn't necessarily participate in because it's done at a fund level. At least we're not allergic to taking capital gains. There are times where it makes sense to take profits. And unless you're going to hold something for the rest of your life, long-term capital gains aren't the worst thing. But at least with an ETF or even an individual stock, generally speaking, the taxes are pretty straightforward. If you made money and you sell it, you will owe capital gains. Having to pay capital gains taxes when you didn't even make the money, that's a pill that's a little tough to swallow.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe to start segueing into some other topics, but to close out on things ahead as well, I think in discussing this whole context of capital gains, year-end taxes, investments, it's easy to punt. Like, it's easy to be like, okay, I have the awareness on my tax situation this year, but I don't want to take gains, and here's why. Fine. What I would urge, and we do obviously in our practice with clients, is, well, let's look at them like in 2 months. Like, let's look at them in January, because all else equal, pretty basic calculus here. If you take gains in January of a new year from an investment that you wanted to take some profits from, you now have 11 months, if you're going to be reinvesting those proceeds, to potentially offset with losses. You're at least giving yourself a better chance than if you sell in December and markets don't move at all, to potentially offset your gains with losses along the way. So using it, it's almost like a time value of money example. Don't punt forever. And if you know that you need to take gains from certain positions in your portfolio, I find the first quarter of a year, markets cooperating, obviously, all else equal, it's probably a better time than any other part of the year to take gains, for what it's worth. It's coming up.
All right. So unless there's anything else from the year-end planning, because those are, one-on-one conversations or the big, beautiful bill, should we move to some headlines that caught our attention, or maybe our time in Austin last week, Pat? What's better to go to first?
I'd imagine a lot of them will
overlap,
will sort of coexist here. Maybe just to give some background on the conference.
Sure.
So Matt, myself, Aaron was not there for the first time. We're dividing and conquering a few conferences this year. So Aaron held down the mothership. Sean Green from our team joined us, but our wonderful partners, Dynasty Financial Partners, which a lot of folks are aware of, they throw what I would call a bit of a flagship event each year in a different city. This year it was in Austin, Texas. It's usually a 2-day event where they basically host some of the smartest investment minds in our industry via sort of panel discussions. And the audience just gets to soak up a lot of information. And I'd say maybe the biggest three, which are probably related to a lot of the headlines that we're going to talk about, was there was a lot of talk about AI. Go figure. A lot of talk about alternative investments or private investments. And there was a lot of talk about bubbles in our economy. So I don't know if you guys want to jump off on.
Let's talk bubbles.
Sure. Yeah. Let's get into it.
Are we in one? Are we not in one? Do we know what we're talking about?
So Matt, what was the consensus down there before you give your own opinion?
Consensus down there was definitely not in a bubble. It was definitely I wouldn't say a totally rosy crowd. Like, it was maybe a little more sober than a year or two ago, but definitely not bubble with consensus down there. And my own opinion, let's define what a bubble is first. Let's lay some ground rules. So to me, you can have a 10% sell-off, a 20% sell-off, and just have it recover And that's not a that's not a bubble. That's a correction. That's a bear market. It can even get uglier than that. As we saw in April, even though the broad market might have been off 20%, some of the big tech stocks were off 30, 40, 50%. Still wouldn't call that a bubble. To me, how I would define a bubble is total wipeout of gain. Like you have something that goes up a ton, gets wiped out, sometimes wiped out and then some, and it just stays down there for a while.
It's like at the end of an era. It's like it's over. It's done.
Yeah, the dot-com crash of the early 2000s. That was a bubble on the way up and then a bubble that crashed. And it took, in some cases, some of those names never recovered, and the indices themselves took over a decade to recover. Housing market, in 07, 08, I would call that a bubble on its way up that then deflated. So with that as a definition of just something that's uglier and more lasting than a bear market or so on, I do not think we're in a bubble. At least I do not think that this run up in stocks is going to, when we look back in hindsight, is going to be a bubble. Doesn't mean we won't get a bear market. It doesn't mean that some things aren't overvalued. But the idea that we're going to see like broad market or huge swaths of it, not individual companies, they always get wiped out, some of them, but huge swaths just get wiped out, end of an era and not recover, I don't see it.
It's a great point. I bet if you gave that same synopsis to every person in the country and everyone was on the same page and now understood what the framework was, I think most people would agree that we're not in a bubble. And again, it's hard to know when that end of an era and wipeout happens. But yeah, I think everyone's aware that like things are frothy, stocks are expensive, we're betting a lot on the future. But yeah, I don't think you get a wipeout. But yeah, could there be some bumpy time? Like today's a bad day. Yesterday was or the day before. There's going to be some choppiness. But I also say that, as smart as we all are, we're all humans and it's herd mentality. And usually when everyone's thinking one thing, it never happens and it's the opposite. So if everyone knows we're in a bubble or there's this uncertainty coming up, probably everything's going to be just fine. I don't really know, but it tends to go that way.
Yeah, I don't know if I have like any crazy insight to add. I think you guys both nailed it pretty well. I think the one thing that is a bit of a contrarian indicator is if all the smart people in the room think that we're not in a bubble like we experienced down in Austin, like maybe we are. And I say that tongue in cheek, obviously, because I do tend to agree, like personally examining data for what it's worth, I do find it a little hard to believe that we're in a bubble. I've heard some other smart people in the industry sort of painted as like, look, we're a smarter investment universe and society at this point where we've learned from our previous mistakes. We try to spot bubbles. We try to understand when we're living in excess, but I don't know if we are the best at that necessarily. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that sentiment's probably a bridge too far for me. I don't think as a society, ourselves included, we're that smart, when it comes to this stuff. Or at least I think humans are still humans and we're still susceptible to the same mistakes that we made before. And I certainly think there's plenty of reason to be concerned that some things are frothy. You could see a sell-off. You're even seeing when earnings are coming out now, some companies are putting out really good numbers and the stocks are getting punished because the expectations were so high. That to me is, again, indicative of maybe overvaluation. Maybe it leads to a correction or bear market, but not how I would define a bubble.
Yeah. Well said.
So speaking of the conference, I would say the headline speaker there was Rick Reeder, who is the head investment person at BlackRock. He runs their flagship global allocation fund. And we were able to also get a smaller private lunch with him. And he had some really interesting stuff. But one of the data points that he was talking about that I think, segues into sort of some of what's going on in society right now is he was looking at revenue per employee across the biggest companies in the country. And basically, I don't know if he had the Mag 7 or it was the S&P, or I forget which universe he was using, but let's say large U.S. companies. Their revenues have gone straight up over the last several years, while their payroll has largely stayed the same. Like the number of employees has largely stayed the same. So therefore, their revenue per employee has skyrocketed. And that's even like not necessarily in the full AI time. Like that, like AI hasn't really fully had its impact yet. So I guess broader question on this is, what does that mean for society? Like companies keep making money, good for a stockholder, but at a certain point, like people need jobs, and right now they have them, but new ones aren't being created. So, any thoughts on that?
I feel like we don't know what the future. I don't think anyone knows what the future employment world looks like. I heard somebody smart speaking that said, back however many years ago, the United States was dominated by agriculture
Mm-hmm.
jobs, and then it was manufacturing, and then it's where we are now. And what's next? I don't know, but we'll evolve and things will change, and maybe unemployment numbers, that normal 2 or 3 or 4%, which is the norm, maybe it changes to something else being the norm. But where will everyone work? It'll evolve and it'll change. We don't know where it's going to happen or how, but I think it'll change.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like sort of comb through on what you just brought up, Matt, and I think it's on the minds of a lot of people right now. There were some opinions on the causes and effects of, to your point, Aaron, a different labor market. How much of that is driven by AI? How many jobs are sort of replaced? Where I keep coming back is like, what the hell do people do if they don't have jobs? Like, you talk about universal basic income. You talk about subsidizing these people somehow. Like, great. I believe qualitatively, like as human beings, like we need purpose. We need, and you don't have to take my word for it. Take it from scientists who have sort of
Right.
the topic. And when you don't have purpose, you sort of go crazy, right? Like your life deteriorates. You don't have like good mental health. You don't have probably not in a good routine, like in good headspace. And like, what does that do to our healthcare system? Like, there's a lot of knock-on effects that I keep coming back to. I'm like, well, I don't see how this is necessarily good for society. Like, great, our profit margins are higher and capitalism is the best it's ever been from a top-down perspective. And like everyone else is just depressed and like dying. Like,
So sorry to get political. So you're saying we shouldn't hire all socialist people just to give us everything for free?
wait, is that happening somewhere?
Yeah. Was there an election this week? I missed that. We'll save that for headlines, maybe. But no, I think you're right, Pat. But even taking a step back, even if you just wanted to be an emotionless, robotic investor, you're not, because a lot of what you're talking about is sort of society and being like a thoughtful human. But let's just say you're purely a P&L person. I still don't see it being as beneficial from this standpoint. If you only have revenues growing and then you're not hiring anybody and then people start losing their jobs, one company's employees are another one's customers. Who's going to buy all the stuff? Like ultimately, I can't get my head around how one can exist without the other for the long term. Now, my guess is it's going to be more like what Aaron said, is that economies evolve, people get new jobs, and that takes time, but that over time we will be fine. But it is these could be treacherous times, and I don't see us staying disconnected where you have treacherous times and wonderful markets. That seems they eventually will converge, I think.
I agree with you. There was a headline that just this morning, I think it was, that I could bring it up. The shorthand was the most amount of job cuts in the U.S. this month in October, just this past month in October, than we've had in 2 decades. So it's like,
Yep.
Anecdotal.
It was the Challenger Gray report. Yeah, my dad sent me that one today. Yeah.
Right, which is a little concerning. Like, I agree with you, Matt. It's like, okay, the economy, like those are normal, traditional, historically indicative inputs to the economy that are going to be negative. And somehow all of our companies are still at all-time high valuations, generally speaking. At some point that there may be some disconnect there. It's just trying to figure out how and when.
And that's not to say that I or we are super bearish. I just think that when people have concerns out there, they're well founded. There's a lot of uncertainty, as there always is, and valuations are not cheap. But we'll save that for the predictions episode next month.
Yeah.
Any what other headlines grabbed either of your attention?
I mean, go ahead, Aaron, if you got one.
I had a few. Well, you guys, mine are sort of all the same stuff that we've talked about already. I can bring them up if you don't have anything, but what do you guys have?
I'll throw one out there. This is obviously big in the headlines this past week or so, and the gentleman you spoke about, Rick Reeder, had a bit of a take on it as well, which we can share. Trump's tariffs are in limbo again, right? Supreme Court is arguably going through the most important economic case in the last many decades. That's a big one. Like, what is going to happen there? Because that throws everything back into the fray.
All the money that's been collected. Also, that's a tricky one. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a economic, political, and operational, just sort of mechanical issue. To your point about all the money that's been collected. Um, and look, I'm not a Supreme Court forecaster, but from what I hear, it doesn't look great for the Trump cause there. And there are other ways for him to put on tariffs. I think some of that depends. I'm probably a little out of my depth here, but at the narrowness or broadness of the Supreme Court's ruling, even if it is negative for him, what other levers he can pull. But yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, some of these algorithms that total up words and speeches, tariff has got to be one of Trump's top 10 words this year. I mean, he's been talking about it nonstop. I think it could. It's interesting. The market sold off a ton in March and April when tariffs were put on. I wonder, though, will we get a similar correction when they're taken off because of the uncertainty? I don't know. Or maybe markets will like it. Hard to say.
It's hard to say because we've tariffs shocked the system, but then you're right, the market's done well, so that by that measure, keep the tariffs on, things are working. But then if you unwind it, right, it goes the opposite direction. It's a wild world we're in.
I'll tell you briefly just what Rick Reeder's sort of opinion was, and through the context of and this is public information, so this is not a secret. He's very much on the very, very short list of potential Fed chairman successors. So he's sort of very much in the focus of like thinking like a Fed chairman at the moment. And his take a little bit was like, if we want to continue to have a globally dominant US dollar for the foreseeable future, which is generally in the interest of most Americans, then you need the economy to stay really, 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 really productive. You need to produce, and you need the cost of your debt to be much lower, which is right now what's not occurring. Like our cost of debt is high and all these kinds of things. The tariffs have helped at least a little bit on the short term of keeping that deficit runaway, which in turn creates dollar destabilization. So he was like, you see the tariffs go the other way. Like that's another major issue for dollar destabilization and the deficit issue that we faced and the case for interest rate cuts and all this kind of stuff. So it was, again, sort of through the lens of a Fed chairman, which is not a unimportant take, obviously. So I just thought that was interesting too, from his perspective.
Yeah, I was surprised he was. I shouldn't say surprised because, look, to your point, the day we met with him, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal listing him as one of the handful of top candidates for the Fed chairmanship. So he likely has to play politics to a degree, but it sounded genuine. He was a lot more, let's say, positive towards tariffs than I'm used to hearing from economists. Maybe it's because he's not a traditional economist; he's more of a pragmatic market guy. But anyway, yeah, no, it's it could be wild.
Certainly could be. We could be in for some fireworks to finish here.
So I'll give you one more headline, and then I think the people need a hoagie review before we get out of here.
Everyone's getting hungry.
Everybody's getting hungry, right? Longest government shutdown on record. I didn't even have to look up the headline; it's all over the place. That's my headline. What do you guys think?
Well,
I generally think it's going to end soon, but maybe that means it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's any cracks happening, and everyone's really putting their foot down. It's like airplane flights are starting to get canceled.
Yep.
It could get ugly here.
Yeah, that was going to be my one, is flights getting canceled. I'm glad I just did a bunch of travel like the last couple of weeks versus the next coming weeks, because it sounds like it's only going to get worse, although I did have some delays and whatnot. So that sucks. It's a pain. It's starting to affect people for real, like national parks and like places people like to go, losing funding. It sounds silly, but like, I'll say this. This is not my personal opinion. It's not like a political take, but I don't want to be in a blinking game with Donald Trump. Like, he's pretty damn good at those. And so I don't know how it's going to shake out, but being that we're in the longest government shutdown on record doesn't surprise me based on that fact. Like,
wasn't the second longest the last time he was president?
You might be right about that. I don't know. That's my point. Like he doesn't care. Like he's good at He's good at the negotiation tactics of like holding out.
No, it's a good point. It's a good leverage in negotiations when you're willing to go to a place that the other side isn't. I mean, that's a now it's interesting because there doesn't seem to be maybe that was Trump calling. There doesn't seem to be a clear cut roadmap. I think the Democrats, after the other night, I imagine are more emboldened. They had a really good night, so I don't see them just passing a clean resolution. And the Republicans, without Democrats, if they're not willing to play ball with them, the only way they can do it is to get rid of the filibuster, which, I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but if there's some way that we could stop doing this every few years and stop having debt ceiling fights, like, hey, how about you guys have a fight like on when passing the budget itself instead of shutting down the government, putting, we have clients that are government workers that have been sitting at home for a month. Like, it's just silly. Like, it's the debt ceiling fight's silly. Like, let's just operate like an actual country. And you know what? If you do a good job, you'll get reelected. If you don't, you should lose. Like, elections have consequences. But this is like knucklehead behavior to me. So
I agree.
Rant over.
I agree. Rant. Good rant.
All right, give the people what they want.
So it was a big eating day a couple weeks ago. We were going downtown to Tacconelli's for pizza for dinner. For those of you who do or don't know Tacconelli, sort of an institution in Philly. And we're going for dinner. I said, hey, if we're going downtown, we got to make it a big day and do some hoagies. So I scoured the internet, Facebook, Instagram. Couple names kept popping up. So the one we ended up settling on with my wife and kids was Farina Davida, second in Catherine, I believe it is. Pat, I don't know if you know that one.
That's my old neighborhood, sort of.
Yep. So awesome neighborhood, by the way. So we go in around noon on a Saturday, Sunday. Cool looking place. Get up to the cash register. And then we got a ton of sandwiches. The cash register guy goes, oh, just so you know, we're out of meatballs. I was like, okay. I probably wasn't doing that anyway, but whatever. And we're trying to decide what to get. And I wanted to do an Italian hoagie. I saw some awesome pictures, and they have a couple different varieties of the Italian. So I say, well, what's the go-to Italian? And he's a young guy, and he grabs the menu and starts looking at it. And I was like, well, that's not a good sign. Why does he have to look at the menu? And we're like 10, 15 seconds goes by. And then from the back, the guy's making the hoagies goes, this is the best hoagie. It's the best in the city. You're not finding any better in terms of Italians. But he goes, but there's actually two here that are even better than that. He was talking about their chicken cutlet sandwiches. So really, what we did not realize, the chicken cutlet and the meatballs are really their go-to. Everything was great. But the meatballs, why they didn't have them, they sold out. We were there at 11:45. They sold out already. The chicken cutlet sandwiches, apparently they sell out early afternoon. So we ended up ordering a ton. We got a chicken parm one. And they don't just do, when you do the chicken parm, they do a vodka sauce instead of traditional marinara. It's actually on their signs that says something in Tito's. I thought Tito was somebody's name, but it's actually Tito's like vodka.
Oh, it's Tito's vodka. Okay.
Correct. So it's sort of their signature thing. So we did some chicken cutlet sandwiches. I got an Italian. We got a turkey. And while we were waiting, the guy in the back, well, I guess he was one of the owners, he comes out and says, hey, I made this one by accident. It's one of our specials today. Do you want it? So now he's buttering us up. So it was a spicy something or other chicken. So all in all, fabulous place. It's a newcomer, only 1 or 2 years old, maybe 3. So it's not one of these institutions that's been there 100 years, but it will become the new institution or one of them. So the hoagies were awesome. The Italian was great. Chicken cutlets were awesome. Oh, and the rolls. Caccia is the name of the bakery. I was not familiar because you got, the Amoroso, Licio's. This was sort of like the marrying of a lot of different stuff. You get a nice seeded roll, but still soft with a crunch. It was all in all very good. So instead of a specific hoagie score, just the place as a whole, it's in the 9s. It's a 9.2, a 9.3. And if I go back for the meatballs, it might be even better. So very good.
Second in Catherine. I got to get down there because that was
it was as I say, second in Catherine. I'll make sure that is what the address was, but it was right over there,
somewhere in Queen Village down there.
Good spot. Good spot for sure.
That sounds. I'm starving right now. So
You're a little far away from Second and Catherine, where
Yeah,
you're saying.
I am.
Yeah, 250 Catherine Street. So, and one last anecdote. I say, if you know if it's a good hoagie place, if you smell like a hoagie when you leave. So they have T-shirts. They're selling T-shirts, and they're in Ziploc bags. And I ended up getting a T-shirt. I take it home. I was like, oh, this T-shirt just smells like the hoagie place, which is like gross in its own right. Anyway, I washed the shirt. Still smelled. I washed it again, and we're okay now. But
do you think that's on purpose? Did they soak it in hoagie oil and put it in the Ziploc? I don't know.
It spreads the aroma around. Right. So great place.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, before we run, any recs, what we're watching, listening to, reading, whatever, anything we should highlight for the listeners?
I watched Task on. I'll go quick. Task on HBO. Would recommend. Liked it a lot. I watched the Monster Ed Gein series on Netflix, which is about the super famous serial killer Ed Gein, played by Charlie Hunnam, who was the Sons of Anarchy guy. Interesting series, very creepy, very gross. You got to be into horror stuff and serial killer stuff to watch that, but I liked it. And I'm reading a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is a very cool book about going cross country on a motorcycle, but the Zen practice of maintaining your motorcycle. It's a life moral book. It's very good.
Oh, I like that.
Heard of that one. That one, yeah, interesting.
Very cool. I watched, piggybacking on my South Philadelphia ventures, Philadelphia and the Mob, I believe it was called, on Netflix. Just wild stuff that this stuff goes on and did go on. It's like it is a movie. I don't want to be any part of that world. I don't want to be a part of that movie, but just wild in its own right.
Yeah, no, I want to watch that one. So I'm a little late to the game, but for the first time since our last podcast, I used Audible and actually listened to a book rather, because I listen to podcasts all the time, and I was a little podcasted out. And I got the book delivered the actual hard copy of Andrew Ross Sorkin's new book called 1929 about the Great Depression. And Andrew Ross Sorkin puts out one book a decade, but they're awesome and they're enormous. So I looked at the size of this thing. I'm it was just too intimidating. I'm all right, this is my moment. I'm going to listen to it on Audible. So I was able to finish it in a week and a half, 2 weeks. If I were reading it, I'd still be reading it now. And I enjoyed the Audible experience, and the book itself is excellent. He is a thorough researcher. He brings characters to life. It feels a lot more like a drama than it does sort of a historic telling, and highly recommend. Excellent book.
I've been seeing it all over the place.
Yeah, that's got our industry by the throat right now. It seems like everybody's talking about it. I added it to my list as well.
Yeah, it's really, if you want the hard copy, you can have mine, but otherwise I'd recommend Audible or one of the listening apps. So.
Fair. Totally fair.
All right. Well, with that, we will wind it down. Episode 42 in the books, and we will see you again before year end.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Stuff, guys.